The yunomi is it's basically just an everyday drinking cup in the East, China, Korea, Japan, and it's kind of their mug really, and it doesn't have a handle. And I've been asked in the past, why do you make these things halfway up a mountain in Wales when it's essentially an Eastern Oriental cup? And my answer to that is that actually in this country we didn't put handles on teacups until about 1860. Up until that point, teacups never had a handle. So it's not quite so alien as you might think. When you think in the 18th century, most of the teacups, tea was very expensive, so it wasn't a drink that poor people could drink anyway. And most of the teacups that we used in this country were Chinese export porcelain, which didn't have handles. And one of the things I like to do often, I'll sit down and perhaps make 30, 40 of these cups in one go, and I'll make them in batches of about 8 or 9 at a time. And each one, each one will be in a series. So I'll make 8 or 9 with basically the same configuration. And then I'll change and make 8 or 9 with a different configuration. And so it's kind of like working on a sort of variations on a theme, really. The days when I used to sit down and throw 100 mugs, I don't do that anymore. First of all, nobody wants to buy them, and secondly, I just don't enjoy it. I can do it. I can't do it as well as some production potters who could literally throw a couple of hundred in an afternoon. I was never that good. But so I just work on variations on a theme. And if halfway through making one, I see another one, I'll go for the other one and come back to in case I lose it. Do you see what I mean? I kind of, sometimes you're halfway through and you think, oh, actually, that's not bad. Then I'll make that one and then come back to the other ones. So on this one, I've left a little bit of a swelling here in the middle, which is going to be a kind of a strap that runs around the pot. So I take that bit off, and then above it, do the same thing. So I've left with the strap now because I've sort of defined it a little better. And I'll just take a little bit out of the center of it, like that. And then I'll use the corner of this rib here, just to, what I hate, but what I don't like about pots is when you have a line that runs around a pot, if it's a line that's engraved in, or a line that's standing out proud, I don't like it if the line runs around the pot absolutely evenly. And if it's an engraved line, a line that runs around, all the way around the rim of a pot that's the same thickness, all the way around and starts where it finishes or finishes where it starts, I don't like. So what I'll do is use the tool a bit in and out so that the line starts thin, gets thicker, finishes thin, and maybe not finishes in exactly the same level as where it started, so the line actually spirals slightly. And I always think those lines are much more interesting than one that just travels around parallel to itself all the way. So with this one, what I'll tend to do now is I'll get this corner here with the wheel running fairly slowly, and I just put the corner in and I just move it around a bit. And I kind of think that that's a more interesting line than something that just runs flat the whole time. And then I'll go from the inside only and work on the shape just from the inside. And with this particular shape that comes into the middle, I quite like it if the top starts to come back in slightly, like that. And you have to also bear in mind that the glazes that I use and have used for years, ash glazes, tend to be fairly fluid. And so I like to put lots of ridges and lines on pots so that the glaze hangs on the line changes color, changes texture. So basically these lines that run around the middle here are essentially to enable the glaze to perform at its best, to be able to show you what it can do. So it runs, gathers, changes color, changes texture. From matte it'll go to shiny. The deeper it gets, the shinier it gets. And then before I take it off the wheel, the last thing I do is I like to get these things, all the pots I make, I like to get them off the wheel as near to finished as possible. So I'll start the trimming process now. So I'll take a little bit off with this tool and then go back with this one. So you can see now that the foot ring that the pot will eventually stand on has actually started to appear. I've cut away some of the clay. It needs more work. It's too wide at the moment. I need to take it in a bit more. And I also, of course, need to cut out underneath to make a recess underneath there. But at least it's beginning, you can begin to see where the foot ring's going to be. And all of that came about because when I first started making pots, my workshop was really damp and things didn't dry very quickly. And so it occurred to me that I should try and get as much clay off the pot now so that I didn't have to dry it when it got on the shelf. So the less clay that was there, the quicker it dried. So that was kind of where it came from. I'm also for a potter, I'm also quite impatient. And I quite like to see the shape of the pot come as soon as I can see it, you know what I mean? I don't want to put a pot on the shelf and then find later when I've trimmed it all down that actually I don't like it very much. So I like to get them as near to finish as I can because I'm essentially impatient, which is not a good thing for a potter because you have to sit and wait 3 days for the kiln to cool down. This one requires to be perfectly smooth. So I take off all the lines with this rib. So that it's nice and smooth. We call these ribs. I was telling people this morning that the reason that is because in the 18th century, the slipware potters up in Stoke, around Staffordshire, actually used cow's ribs for this job. So that's where the name the rib comes from. A friend of mine made it. Yeah, it's ingenious. He's a very clever woodworker. So we tried, quite how he's done this, I don't know, but basically I think it was some kind of, he rigged up some kind of jig on a machine where the drill was working on arm of some description, which he could then change the length of. So it came round like that, then he changed it back, 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 and then he changed it, and it made those marks. It's clever, isn't it? I wouldn't even begin to know how he did it. So of course I can't touch the outside now, so I have to throw just from the inside. So I'm just bellying it out a little bit, making the shape. But you can make these slightly more simple ones just with a saw, cutting with a saw, which is exactly how I did that one. Just cut with a saw, and you can do different patterns, 3 lines, 2 lines, 3 lines, 2 lines, and then come the other way. That's particularly clever. So again, you can see the foot ring starting to come. But this technique is a little bit like when you were kids and you used to write on a balloon and then blow the balloon up, and the writing would take on the shape of the balloon, or you draw a face on the balloon. And as you expand the cup out, so the little diamond shapes get bigger. And then they kind of take on, there's some harmony develops between the decoration and the pot, the surface of the pot, because you've expanded the pot into the decoration. See what I mean? And of course, again, with the glazes that I use, the glaze will pick up on all of those lines. There are lots of yunomis that I make which I can't show you now because the decoration takes place after the pot has been trimmed or firmed up a little bit. I can't actually do those decorations right now. So this one is a variation of this one. So as I throw upwards, I get to a point about halfway, and I stop, and I jump a little bit and start again. And that leaves that little, can you see, little ridge there? Stop, jump, carry on.